So we're going to look at a couple of photographs that again depict the concentration camps. So some of them are quite graphic and hard to look at, but I'm just giving you a heads up. So in Maus, we also get a sense of the gradual progression or escalation of violence that occurred, and it becomes clear that it wasn't an overnight. Uh, there wasn't sort of concentration camps or extermination camps used to kill everybody overnight. It was a gradual process whereby the Nazis sort of systematically used force and enlisted a system in which they could sort of keep track of Jewish families, and every single Jewish individual had to be sort of put within this system and kept track of. And then there was the next step of sort of creating ghettos. These were sort of confined areas within towns and cities across Europe that Jewish families were sort of forced out of their homes and into these sort of private, not private, but secluded quarters, and again rounded up as if they were animals, placed in these sort of confining areas, and then systematically these ghettos were sort of cleared of all Jewish people, and those people were sent to concentration camps, extermination camps. The concentration camps were often work camps. So Vladik will eventually be sent to a work camp, and again, these often were almost another. They would become extermination camps at the end, where um, vast quantities of people were being murdered. So ghettos were established by Nazi Germany to confine Jews to these high density areas of the city. And at this point, it was a sort of a staging where the divisions were being made between those who were able workers, able-bodied, and then those who would be deemed unworthy of life. So those who could not be of purpose or use for the Nazis were exterminated. The old, the young, and people who were, again, frail. And in many cases, um, the ghettos served as a systematic catalog of all Jewish family members, and then these families would later be divided and then deported to external extermination camps located in Germany. So this photograph is taken from Dachau, which was opened in 1933. It's a concentration camp that was opened almost not even 2 months after Hitler seized power. And at first it was used to hold political prisoners, so anybody who, again, opposed the state, including communists and social democrats who, again, were enemies of Hitler's. But over the years, again, the population of this camp swelled with all of Hitler's enemies, so anyone he deemed unworthy of life. And that, of course, includes Jews, but it also includes homosexuals, gypsies, and Jehovah's Witnesses, and anybody else who was, again, deemed inferior or an enemy of the Nazi Party. These pictures were actually taken on the day of liberation when the Allies came to liberate the concentration camp. This man here is obviously exhausted. While this wasn't an extermination camp, the reality is that you could die at any moment. It doesn't matter if you were able-bodied worker or not. Again, it was very much up to the whims of the guards, the SS soldiers, Nazi soldiers, who, again, held your fate in their hands. Your life was in their hands, and they could at any moment decide that you were expendable and kill you right there and then with no consequences. So the emotional, the mental, and physical toll of living in under constant fear is part of the reality that these Jewish prisoners, victims, had to live with while they were held prisoner. And obviously, we have a photograph of the uh, lost lives that, again, were loaded up onto this truck where there was, again, numerous people did not live through this experience, and the death tolls were estimated up to 6 million Jews, Poles, Russians, etc., who lost their lives in this experience. And again, that number is so hard to imagine, the vastness of how many people that actually is, right? It's sort of an overwhelming to think about. But again, um, we sort of have to, we only get Vladik's experience of this story and how he survived. But again, there's countless others who lost their lives during this time. And again, the chances of survival were so slim that it's almost a miracle that anyone survived. Here's another picture of, this is actually within the ghetto in Poland. And in this picture we get the SS guards there. And you can see their uniforms. And then you see them speaking with a Jewish man. And on his chest you can see that there is the Star of David, the badge that all Jewish people were forced to wear, and which is also depicted in Art Spiegelman's Mouse. So again, we'll look at a couple of pictures that represent or that illustrate what the ghettos look like and get an idea of some of the inspiration for Art Spiegelman's Mouse. Here's a photograph of one of the uh, living areas. So there was sort of whole Jewish families that were kicked out of their houses, their property seized, their businesses seized by the SS soldiers, and again forced to relocate into these ghettos of in different cities across Europe. Some of them were not given apartments. Vladik's family, Anya's family, they were given an apartment to live in. Some families, again, were forced to live in sort of these makeshift shanties. But again, extreme poverty, and the conditions were so, they were deprived of all sort of any sense of humanity, and all their sort of any sort of luxury was taken away from them. So their families were kicked out of their houses. Food was again kept to a minimum. You had to use the black markets in order to feed your family, and it was very much a project of extermination, right? Even from the start, where you were slowly depriving these Jewish families of any sort of ability to take care of themselves. And you had to be extremely resourceful, as Vladik is, to again support yourself and your family and ensure that their lives are taken care of, their basic needs are taken care of. And we learn how Vladik is so resourceful and how he is able to take every single opportunity that he has, and he collects things that people discard, or he sees the value in something like his wife's doll collection that he's later able to trade in order to feed his family. So all these little things that, again, someone else might have wasted or thrown away, Vladik sees value, and he's has the ingenuity and resourcefulness to use these to his advantage. So when we think about the genre of Mouse and where it falls into, we've talked about it as a graphic novel, but when we think about what the actual text is, we can it does sort of blur the lines between fiction and nonfiction. It's fiction in the sense that, Spiegelman is using mice to depict real life characters. So in that regard, we have this layer of allegory the cat and mouse allegory that he lays on top of what is, in fact, a memoir. So his father's memoir of how he survived the Holocaust. So on one level, we do have a nonfiction story as well. So this is the true oral history that Vladik provided to Art in a series of interviews um, during the 1970s when Art was beginning writing Mouse and he wanted to record his father's history for this book that he was working on. So we can see Vladik's story as one of many testimonies that would have existed. So it is a oral history, so he's speaking to Art, and you can actually find some footage where you can hear Vladik's voice as he speaks. And there's some interviews that we might look at a little later, but you can hear Vladik speaking over top of the exercycle while he's on his bicycle. He'll be telling Art his story of how he survived. And I think the book itself does a really good job of capturing Vladik's dialect. And again, his speech pattern is interesting to hear in real life. So any sort of oral history is also considered a testimony. And a testimony is, again, a subjective history. So it may or may not be, again, entirely reliable. We get sort of gaps or holes in somebody's story often because the human mind, all humans are, again, not perfect. We're not documents. We, again, have subjective histories. So the only sort of gaps that exist in this story are the memories that Vladik can't remember. So there might be some things that he remembers differently than how other documents record the events. We're without Anya's diaries, so we just have Vladik's perspective given in the story. But this is Vladik's testimony of how he survived. Again, you could write a testimony or an oral history for every single person who survived this experience. His story is one of millions. So the format of Mouse is rather complex, and again, it goes from past to present and jumps forward and backwards within the time frame. So chronologically, we start out in book one with Art. This is in the 1970s. Rico Park. He's interviewing his father and getting information, recording Vladik's testimony, and again, he will create Mouse using these testimonies. And then we have an inset story. So our inset story is the story that Vladik tells Art, and we have this illustrated as well. So these are the moments when the text is sort of flashing back to Vladik's early life, when he meets Anya, how they met and fell in love, his experiences as a soldier in the war, and then his attempts with Anya to avoid capture, becoming prisoners, and sent to a concentration camp. So this is one of the inset stories. Another inset story would be Prisoner on Hell Planet. So that is, again, taking place within 1968 after the Holocaust. And that inset story is about Art Spiegelman's own battle with mental illness. And it also covers the circumstance of Anya's suicide. The framing stories are, again, the ones that take place more recently, or the most recently. So the framing story would be, again, Art's visiting to his visits to his father and the recording of Vladik's testimonies. So that would be an outer framing story. And then there's also in book two another framing story where it's sort of a flash forward. It takes place following the publication of Mouse, and Art Spiegelman directly addresses the audience and talks about how he is struggling with writing part two, book two of the sequel to Mouse. Given its critical and commercial success, he struggles with writer's block. So that would be the another layer